Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our webinar, Safeguarding Our Rights, Legal Strategies for the LGBTQIA+ community. We are very excited to have you join us tonight in this safe virtual space. My name is Becky Vivrette. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the current vice chair of the Howard County LGBTQIA+ Commission. In 2022, our county executive, Dr. Calvin Ball, formally established our commission, and our purpose since that time has been to work to advance equity, inclusion, and understanding for all gender and sexual identities in Howard County. And we aim to promote supportive policies and systemic changes for LGBTQIA+ individuals. Our commission meets every other month on the second Thursday of the month at 6:30 p.m. These meetings are open to the public, so you can learn more about our work and view our meeting materials and other resources at howardcountymd.gov/LGBTQIA. This webinar is also presented with support from the Office of Human Rights and Equity, or we call them OHRE, and comes at a critical time where LGBTQIA+ rights are facing significant threats from federal policy changes, as everyone is aware. So we are aiming to mobilize LGBTQIA+ rights and all the individuals and allies that go along with that with practical tools and safeguards. And we're hoping to hear more about that today and answer some of your questions. So thank you again for joining us. And I also want to thank our commission planning team who is here today, OHRE, and of course our panelists for joining us as well. And we hope that this webinar will just be a starting point to continue building a supportive and thriving community together across Maryland. So now I'll turn it over to Tommy, who is our chair of our ad hoc public policy committee. Tommy is going to provide a brief policy overview before we turn it over to Janae, who will introduce our expert presenters from Free State Justice and the Howard County Register of Wills. Also a quick note on some housekeeping. If you have any questions to submit to the presenters during the webinar, please go ahead and place them in the Q&A section of the chat function. It's next to the chat, the three little dots, and Janae will read them later on for the presenters to respond to. So just so you know, the individuals who submit questions in the Q&A section will not be identified to the broader webinar audience, and only the panelists can view those questions. So it's a way for everyone to have an opportunity to ask questions, but also maintain everyone's privacy to the extent that we can. So now I will turn it over to Tommy to get us started.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tommy Zai. My pronouns are he, him. Glad we are here together to talk about ways that we can help protect one another. I'm going to be presenting in just a moment here on some of the key concerns for the LGBTQ+ community. All right. So there have been a variety of changes at the federal and at the state level, as well as state and local level, I should say, regarding LGBTQIA+ rights that need to be known, and we need to make sure that we are addressing properly. I'd like to start with some legal threats to transgender rights that we've been made aware of here, starting with erasure of trans identity. There's been executive orders from the presidency starting on January 20th and actually going beyond that, calling for federal agencies to wipe out any acknowledgement of transgender people, intersex people, and non-binary people. There's also threats in the form of identity documentation on federal and state level here. The U.S. State Department has stopped issuing gender marker corrections on passports. Since making this slide, I've also heard reports that they have stopped issuing passports for people who do not, for transgender people. In 2023 in Montana, they enacted SB 280, which prevents trans individuals from amending their sex designation on their birth certificates. Tennessee passed a similar law restricting changes to gender markers. For transgender youth, on January 29th, the president signed the Ending Radical Indoctrination in K-12 Schooling. executive order. This measure could revoke federal funding from schools that support the social transition of transgender students. For example, recognizing the chosen names and pronouns of those folks. On the 28th, President Trump signed the Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation executive order, uh, instructing agencies to revoke funding for medical institutions that research or provide gender affirming care for youth and to eliminate protections for transgender youth in federal healthcare programs. It also directs the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute providers of gender affirming care. There's also been expanded use of religious exemptions, discrimination justification, using religious reasoning to get exemptions for employment, healthcare, education, and other protections. Uh, 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis 2023 Supreme Court upheld the right of business owners to refuse services to same-sex couples based on religious beliefs. Executive orders like EO 13831, implemented during the previous administration, expanded religious exemptions for federal contractors, affecting education, healthcare, and employment policies. These policies have ripple effects, and the federal actions could set precedents for state-level rollbacks of protections. We're also seeing uncertainty around marriage equality, potential threats to federally protected marriage, especially here. Justice Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court, his concurrence in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022, suggested that the Supreme Court may reconsider landmark rulings like Oberfeld v. Hodges. That is the Supreme Court case that established the federal marriage equality here. In states such as Texas, bills like HB 2889 have been introduced to end state recognition of same-sex marriages if Oberfeld is overturned. This, of course, comes with a potential loss of spousal benefits, parental rights, inheritance protections, and more. In terms of healthcare, insurance providers may deny services to LGBTQIA plus patients. Changes to Section 1557 of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, have allowed religious healthcare institutions to deny services to the LGBTQI plus patients, including reproductive and gender affirming care. These restrictions will affect family planning and abortion access for the community. We also are facing potential rollbacks of human rights protections. Federal protections regarding employment, housing, and education are under challenge. In 2021, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, proposed weakening the Equal Access Rule, which protects LGBTQI plus individuals from discrimination in federally funded housing, which could lead to increased homelessness for the community. There are organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, have received federal funding while advocating for policies that curtail our rights under the pretext of religious freedom. These federally funded entities may discriminate under religious freedom provisions should this pattern continue. In terms of for reproductive, parental, and caregiving rights, states may deny recognition of LGBTQI plus families. Alabama's Adoption Protection Act, SB 145, enacted in 2017, allows adoption agencies to refuse placement of children with LGBTQI plus couples on religious grounds. There may also be restrictions on surrogacy and IVF that we may see increase here. In states like Texas and Mississippi, they have these restrictions have affected access to IVF, surrogacy, and other family planning services that are used by the LGBTQI plus community as well as others. I do not want to say that we need to give up hope. We absolutely do not and should not give up hope. Despair is a paralytic, and there is a lot that we can do, as well as many organizations that are working to help protect our rights and advance our freedoms here. I know that was a lot. I know it's been a lot. This year has felt already like too much for folks to handle. Trust me, I very much understand that. I work adjacent to politics, and it's been a heck of a year so far. but we're in this together. We will get through this together. We're going to watch out for one another. I do see a question. Even though they talked about overturning Oberfeld in the Respect for Marriage Act passed by Congress, protect us. I could be wrong on this. Oh, nope, thank you. Yeah, requires the federal government and all states to recognize same-sex and interracial marriages if they were legally performed in the past or are performed in the future in places where they are still legal, including other states, but it does not enshrine the right to same-sex or interracial marriages nationwide. Thank you for providing that in the chat. Check the Q&A here if there's any questions. I see a question here. My trans daughter changed her gender marker on her passport to F. She is concerned about renewing her passport. What would you advise? Oh, beg pardon. Afraid legal advice like that is going to be beyond what we're able to share here as a commission. But I can refer you to our presenters, who I believe it is probably going to be their turn to speak real soon here. I think that is all of the questions that we've got here so far. Thank you all very much for your questions and for your attention. I'd like to now turn it over to our first presenter. I believe that is Lauren Pruitt.
Good evening, everyone. Our first presenter, Lauren Pruitt, is the legal director at Free State Justice, an organization focused on improving the well-being of LGBTQIA+ individuals in Maryland. In her role, she offers comprehensive legal advice and representation to clients on a variety of issues. At the head of the legal team, Lauren provides both written and oral legal guidance, evaluates cases, and develops strategies to enhance the organization's expertise in its different areas of practice. She earned her Juris Doctor from Georgetown University Law Center and a Bachelor of Business Administration from Howard University. The office and the commission are thrilled to welcome Lauren this evening. Lauren, turning it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, again, my name is Lauren Pruitt, and I'm the legal director of Free State Justice. I sincerely hope that the information you hear tonight will help to protect yourselves and your family. As we can see, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of changes that are going to affect folks' lives. And we hope to make sure that you have the information that will help you to be proactive and be your best advocate and help you to protect yourself and know your rights. So first, I want to say thank you for your attention tonight, and please feel free to reach out to Free State for any additional information on our services and resources. Just a little bit about Free State for folks who may not have heard of us. We are a Maryland-based nonprofit seeking to improve the lives of Maryland's LGBTQ plus community. We provide assistance with pro bono legal services. We also have a policy team that works on legislative advocacy, and then attend trainings like this and community outreach events like this one to ensure that the community is both educated and has knowledge of the policies and laws that are impacting their lives. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about just a few topics on kind of Maryland's protections for civil rights. I'll talk about second parent adoptions, name change and gender marker petitions, as well as accessing gender affirming care and anti-discrimination advocacy. I don't have a lot of time, so please feel free if you need additional information to reach out to Free State. If there are things that we can assist with, we definitely will. We have access to a pro bono panel of attorneys that can also help with different types of cases. And then, of course, if you just need assistance with resource, government benefits, we can set you up with one of our resource navigators who can assist with those types of, applications. Again, if you just have questions about any type of thing relating to advocacy, please feel free to reach out. So I want to start out with just saying, like, folks are not alone. I'm excited to see how many people are on this call. We want to get the information out to as many people as we can. Obviously, with the re-election of Donald Trump and the rise of anti-LGBTQIA plus sentiments, along with discriminatory laws, these are, very concerning developments. Policy changes that are occurring at both the federal and state levels are, again, scary for a lot of folks. So the first thing I just want to make sure folks are aware of is that, the executive orders that have come out, changes to federal laws and policies and regulations, obviously going to impact folks like federal workers, our rights under federal law. But luckily, living in Maryland, we still are going to be safeguarded by our local and state laws. Maryland's governor has made sure that Maryland is a safe haven for folks within the LGBTQ plus community, and folks that are, obviously broadly impacted by civil rights laws and attacks on folks' autonomy and the right to live their authentic lives. So hopefully that is something that will give folks hope as far as, feeling safe in their communities in Maryland. Maryland has very progressive policies that protect LGBTQIA plus individuals, and there are ways for families to safeguard themselves against these potential policy changes at the federal level. So just a little bit about Maryland's civil rights protections. This weekend, actually on Saturday, the State of Maryland Commission on Civil Rights held a symposium. I was on one of the panels, and it was called Protecting Our Rights During Challenging Times. So the idea was to reassure the people of Maryland that the state remains that beacon of equity, inclusion, and justice. The executive director of MCCR stated that the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights has a clear mandate. They are there to ensure that every individual, regardless of race, religion, national origin, gender identity, disability, or any other protected class, is treated with dignity, respect, and fairness under Maryland state law. So I know recent federal executive actions have left many folks feeling vulnerable, threatened, and uncertain. But Marylanders, I really want you to rest assured that the executive is behind you, the MCCR is behind you, and they are, want to make sure that we are equipped, that we are prepared, and that they will assist to resolve challenges to undermine the progress that Maryland has made in securing rights for all Marylanders, including the LGBTQI plus community. And so the first thing I want to talk about, which we've gotten a lot of calls regarding second parent adoption at Free State. And again, you have a lot of folks that either use IVF or other reproductive methods in order to have a family. And this obviously includes same gender, same sex couples. And so, folks, may be unsure about if something happens to one of the parents, what happens with the child, especially if the other parent is not a biological parent. And so one of the ways that we're advising folks to protect themselves is through second parent adoption. And even if you are already on the child's birth certificate, maybe you had the child in Maryland and were able to utilize the affidavit of parentage in order for both parents to be on the birth certificate. Just in traveling, even just around the United States, it's kind of like a belt and suspenders. You may want to also protect yourself by having adoption order in place or adoption records that solidify the relationship that both parents hold, a legal recognition as establishing that connection with that particular child. In Maryland, the process involves the completion and filing of a petition. It is a streamlined adoption process, which eliminates the need for a formal notice and hearing as compared to traditional adoptions. I would say this is a really important step in safeguarding a child's relationship with a non-biological parent. And ensures continuity even in the event of the biological parent's death or separation. Obviously, any adoption is going to be complex. It is a process. The court is involved. So I do emphasize that there may be a need to seek an attorney in navigating that particular process to avoid any potential pitfalls and to ensure a successful outcome. Again, there are many organizations and nonprofits that provide direct legal services at pro bono or reduced rates for folks. So, it's just a matter of putting in an intake for that particular entity to see if you qualify. And I would don't self-select your out of that process, just thinking, oh, I probably don't qualify, because they do consider your um, salary, or again, of the family, of the household, as well as the household size. So it's not just a simple like, do you make this amount and either you qualify or you don't. There are some other things that go into that process of deciding if someone is eligible for free or pro bono services or reduced rate services. So again, second parent adoption could be an option for folks, solidifying the relationship between the parents and the child. And again, it's best not to wait until something happens. You'll hear about estate planning later. It's always better to do this when things are good, when everyone is able and available to participate. And again, that's the best way to ensure that you are protecting your family and obviously the rights and to make decisions for your children. The next area I'll talk about is name changes. In Maryland, name changes can be filed with or without a judicial declaration of gender identity. I will note that petitions with a declaration of gender identity are automatically sealed in Maryland. There's no need for a motion to seal or any additional step. And so some folks are using the joint petition with their name change for that reason. And when I say sealed, what I mean is that you can't just go on Maryland Case Search, which is available to the public, and look up a person's name and see that they have a pending name change. So that may be something to help protect someone's privacy and confidentiality. So to file for a name change, you need a petition. It's pretty straightforward, just your current name, your name of common use, or the name that you're changing to. There is a area where you have to state the reason for the change. And we simply just say this is the individual's name of common use. They've used this name consistently and non-fraudulently. You do not have to get into like how long you've used the name or which ways you've used the name and how you've integrated it into your personal life or social life or in employment arenas. You don't have to state any of that information, which is really helpful for a lot of folks. So it's your name of common use, and that is enough in order to state the name that you're changing to. You also need a copy of your ID, whether it's a driver's license or your state ID or a birth certificate. You can also use a social security card, passport. You can use a birth certificate from another country. If it is in another language, you should provide a translated copy, but it's still allowable to be used to identify yourself for the purposes of the name change. Now, anything relating to changing documents in another country, you would have to follow that country's requirements, and your Maryland court order may not be able to be used for that matter, but you can use your documents from another country to prove who you are and to apply for your Maryland name change. Additional information may be required. Like, for example, if you had previous name changes, they may ask for copies of orders or the information surrounding like adoption or marriage or a prior name change order, that type of information. For minors, minors in Maryland cannot, for the most part, cannot file petitions themselves. So the name change has to be filed by a parent or guardian or custodian for that particular minor. And then all other parents, guardians, or custodians have to be served or put on notice about the petition. And if one person objects, they're likely to hold a hearing. And even if the hearing is held, even if a parent does object, that does not mean that the name change will not go through. It just means that all parties will have to be heard on the matter, and then a judge will make a determination. All parties will be asked to consent, including the minor. If the minor is over or 10 years or older, they will also sign a consent form to the name change, letting the judge know that they do consent, or object if this is a parent that is wanting to change the name and the minor does not want to change their name, then the minor can also object to that name change. In Maryland, there is a 30-day waiting period. So once you file with all of your documents, they'll wait 30 days. And then once the 30 days is up, your name change will be sent to the judge's desk to be signed, unless there's a need for a hearing for some reason. I will say that it's not signed immediately. There may be some time in between when it's on the judge's docket. So I would expect in Maryland, most counties, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months. If you're in Baltimore City, anywhere from, I would say, 3 to 6 months. So just so you have an understanding of the timing. But once the 30-day waiting period is up, if you have filed pro se, which means you filed on your own, I would call the clerk and see if, make sure that your name change has been sent to the judge's desk. There is a lot of moving parts at the clerk's office, and you want to be sure that it's not sitting and waiting and hasn't gone to the judge yet once your 30 days is up. There are costs and fees associated with a name change in Maryland, and that includes the name change, a name change with a gender designation, or just a gender designation by itself. The cost is $165, and you'll file it in the circuit court. And there's actually several different places in which you can file. So you can file it in the circuit court where you live, which is based on your residency, based on your address. And your address does not have to match the name on your ID, so that's important. Most courts do require the ID to be unexpired, but if there's it costs money obviously to renew, and if you're about to get a new ID because you're getting a name change, they may take that hardship under consideration and allow you to use an expired ID. So you can file it in where you live. You can also file a name change in the county in which you were born. So if I find that someone lives in Baltimore City but was born in another county, I may advise them that we should file in the other county just for speed reasons, and ensuring that they'll probably get that order back a little quicker. You can also file in the county where you work. So again, if you live in Baltimore City but work in another county, I would advise filing it in the other county. There's also, you can file it in a place where you do business. So if you own your own business and have several clients or customers in other counties, you may be able to file in a county that is more expedient as far as filing. And this also works if you live out of state. So if you live out of state, where we're born in Maryland, you can file in that county. If you live out of state but work in Maryland, you could file in a Maryland county. So Maryland being very affirming for folks, a lot of times folks will hopefully find a reason that they can file in Maryland, especially if they live in a state that's less affirming. And then as far as the gender marker updates, you do not, for your Maryland state IDs, need a court order to change your gender. You can go into the DMV at any time and self-select or self-attest to your gender. You can choose an M, an F, or an X for your driver's license or your ID cards. Maryland birth certificates currently only permit M or F, but you can request that your birth certificate gender be changed. You do not need a court order, but you do have to have a signed affidavit from a healthcare provider if you don't have a court order. And it doesn't specify the type of healthcare provider. So it could be mental health care, it could be a physical doctor. And it does not state specifically what type of treatment you have to be going under. So that's really helpful for folks and really beneficial for folks, recognizing that everyone's transition is different and everyone's medical needs are different, and so it allows you to utilize the healthcare providers that you have as an individual to write that affidavit or sign that affidavit for you in order to update your Maryland birth certificate. As was mentioned earlier, rules for updating names and gender markers vary by state. So you can check with the state DMV or vital statistics for information on how to make changes to specific state documents. I used to say for folks who came from very unaffirming states or states that make it very difficult to change your birth certificate, like Louisiana, Florida, that it's better to get a passport. Unfortunately, with like the signing of a pen, that has become extremely difficult now. Because what the passport used to do was allow someone to have, like, for example, if you were doing your I-9 verification for employment, instead of showing a birth certificate with one name and one gender, and then your driver's license with another name and another gender or a different gender, you could just use your passport. And so with the changes with the executive order and the removal of the non-binary option from passport applications, you have to kind of be very strategic with how you present your documents, and may have to go through hoops in order to change your birth certificate in some of these unaffirming states. In most states that are unaffirming, usually they just don't have a process, so you still can petition the court in those states, but again, it may take hiring an attorney, it may take going in person, and obviously that can be a huge barrier to folks as far as traveling to do those to submit to those processes. But again, at Free State, we will assist folks to help them find similar organizations that may help in changing documents in states where there's no process. So obviously, the having an up-to-date ID is very important. Having IDs and documents that don't match can be very outing. There's a high risk for harmful or dangerous interactions, and that can include with police trying to enter government buildings, trying to get services, government benefits. And so I cannot stress how important it is. So if you do live in Maryland and you're not sure about changing your documents, it may be helpful to reach out to an organization like mine and other organizations that help with the name change process, just so you can find out more information and again be able to protect yourself. So there are, again, if you're using a name of common use and you don't use the name on your ID, I've had folks get pulled over and a police officer asks them their name and they give them the name that they've been using for 10 to 15 years and they just haven't updated their ID to the police officer. That can easily become them trying to give them a false name. And so having an ID that matches and is accurate can be life-saving at times. So if you want more information about changing your name legally, please reach out to folks that can assist. Another area that is extremely important is accessing gender affirming care. Especially for transgender individuals, gender affirming care is a medical necessity. And one of the kind of the misnomers for folks is that gender affirming care just simply means surgeries, but it can include hormone therapy, surgeries, other treatments that help align an individual align their physical bodies with their gender identity. Access to gender affirming care is not only crucial for an individual's mental health and well-being, but again, it can be life-saving. Unfortunately, we've seen that multiple states have attempted to restrict access to gender affirming care, making it difficult or impossible for individuals to access the care they need. I think it's something like 22 states that currently have laws that ban gender affirming care for minors. And this can create significant barriers for those folks to affirm their gender identity. This leads to increased risk of depression, anxiety, and suicide. So we at Free State have been advocating for policies and practices that ensure that access to gender affirming care for all individuals who need it, regardless of their age or other factors, they're able to receive it. So Maryland defines gender affirming care very broadly, and procedures like hair removal, facial feminization surgery are all included in that definition. So like all medical care, there's guidance and rules around gender affirming care. There are professional organizations that generally support access to gender affirming care. And I just can't state enough that, again, the individual has to be the first advocate for themselves, and understanding that, again, under the Trans Healthcare Act and other sections of the ACA, your health care is afforded to you. It is a right. I know with some of the changes, obviously at the federal level, that we have to, obviously take notice. We have seen that there are some doctors' offices and providers that are reducing, surgeries and restricting how far out they'll schedule surgeries because they're worried about violating federal law or violating the executive orders that we've seen. But again, there are protections in Maryland, and depending on your healthcare insurance and other rights that you have under Maryland state law, it is important whether or not the healthcare providers in Maryland may be violating your rights. I will also note quickly United States First Committee, which is a pending United States Supreme Court case on whether bans on transgender medical procedures, which includes puberty blockers and hormone therapy for minors, violates our rights under the Equal Protection Clause, which is part of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And today, the ACLU filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump and the executive order that shuts down access to necessary medical care for trans folks under 19. So this complaint was actually filed in the District Court of Maryland. And one of the reasons was hoping to seek an injunction on that executive order. So, again, there is hope there. There is, folks that are fighting for your rights. And so what I will say for folks is, while these things play out in court, and see, to see what protections we'll have in the future, especially under federal law, it is really important that if you're experiencing issues with accessing care, to follow all necessary steps to allow you to appeal any denials for care. Before, like, the Trans Healthcare Act in Maryland, we saw a lot of doctors that would just say, oh, these things aren't covered, here's the cost out of pocket. But now that we know that they're covered, we don't want doctors to go back to saying, well, I'm not sure if this is going to be legal later, so here's just the out-of-pocket costs, because I'm not even going to put this through to your insurance. Require that these doctors are putting any procedures through insurance. If you get denials from your insurance, find out what the appeals process is. A lot of them have very strict time limits when you have to put in appeals. You may have to do it in writing. If you need assistance with that, reach out to, again, organizations like myself or others that will assist with that process. Maryland has the Health Coverage Assistance Team, which, even if you're not under like Medicaid or Medicare, you can still reach out, even if you have private insurance, for assistance with navigating insurance denials, insurance appeals. And they have the language that will help ensure that you are getting the care that you need. And they have I'll put in the chat like the information regarding their online forms and website. But it's a great tool to use in order to fight any type of denial of service, and make sure that we're holding our providers accountable for the medical provision that they are supposed to be giving us. And as far as like discrimination claims with hospitals or providers, it is important to have dates, times, names of persons involved in the interactions, so that a proper investigation can be conducted. Also, proximity to the treatment is important. The sooner that you reach out, the easier the investigation will be once it's conducted, whether it's by MCCR or internally by the hospital or the medical practice. So reaching out as soon as you can to make those claims and is really important, and having the information as far as when you sought treatment, what happened, you know, kind of think about being a journalist, right? Like who, when, where, what, why, who said what to whom. That is going to be kind of your first step in fighting against that injustice or that discrimination or discriminatory behavior. And so that kind of leads me to talking about anti-discrimination advocacy. Again, Maryland law prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Current Supreme Court rulings also provide some protections under Title VII for employment discrimination, but again, with some of the executive orders and you know, the attacks on the LGBTQ plus community by this current administration, there is you know, and obviously the makeup of our Supreme Court, we don't know what safeguards we're going to have at the federal level. But if you believe that you face discrimination, you can file a complaint with Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. The MCCR can assist with matters relating to housing, public accommodations, employment, healthcare services, state contracts, commercial property and leasing. And even if you're not sure if your situation falls under one of those areas, it's really helpful to reach out to them. They work very closely with the governor's office and the attorney general's office. If they see like statewide discrimination, they can pick up and take a claim against a bad actor like an employer or a healthcare provider, even without, you know, having individual folks that want to file a lawsuit, because maybe you don't want to pursue a lawsuit, but you just want to make sure that MCCR is on notice about, you know, these particular actions regarding one of those the areas that they work to protect us in. One of the other really important parts is to start by notifying the relevant entity or organization of the discriminatory behavior. We get a lot of calls at Free State by folks who, let's say, felt that they were discriminated against by their employer. And many times they have not told anyone at work about the things that are going on. And so you have to put folks on notice. I know that is difficult. I know that can be scary. Find out who your HR is, find out who your, you know, if it's your boss, who your boss's boss is, and let them know confidentiality is important. Let them know that, you know, you're worried about retaliation. But it's really important that you put them on notice so that they can go through the process of correcting the behaviors. If you don't put them on notice and, you know, there's very little that MCCR, or if we still have an EEOC or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission at the federal level, there's very little that they'll be able to do if the employer or, you know, the provider or the store or restaurant that didn't provide you service, if you didn't give them notice as far as what's going on or what happened. So again, taking detailed notes, who you talk to. Remember that you may not have access, like if it's your employer, they may cut off access to your emails or your, you know, your work phone or your text messages. So, you know, finding a way to safeguard that information can be really, really important. But be careful that you don't accidentally, you know, send things to like a personal device if that is against your company policy. But maybe you have a person at your job that is an ally. Send that information to them to safeguard and to be able to share with you if you need additional information, or just to make sure that when the investigators look for that information, you can say exactly where to find it and who to go to. If you have emails that, you know, are derogatory, or emails that show that you were passed over for promotion, or, you know, your work schedule was changed, you know, without notice once you came out, you know, all those things are important. And it's really important for you, again, to be your best advocate and your first advocate, even when reaching out to other organizations for assistance. So I've said a lot. The last thing I just want to mention, and again, you'll have a copy of this PowerPoint. There are a lot of organizations out here that are working hard to protect us, not only on a national level, on a state level, on a local level. And, you know, reach out to those organizations. If you have extra time and want to volunteer with those orgs, you know, everyone is hurting and need of assistance and need of community. That may be a great way to kind of keep abreast of everything that's going on, and also find like-minded folks to, have community and fellowship with. If there's, you don't see a chapter in your area, maybe that's something that you want to take on and bring to your local area. And you'll have folks that can help and assist with that process. So just remember that the most impactful policies from our lives come from our state. So get involved in state policy, get involved, call up your senators, your delegates, let them know what's going on with you, let them know what's happening in your lives, in your area, especially if you feel like, you're being denied services or government benefits. Let them know how they can help you, because they are here to serve you and work for you. And so they need to hear your voice as far as, what policies they are supporting or not supporting. And there is a LGBTQ plus caucus in Maryland. And a lot of our affinity groups have different caucuses. So reach out to them and let them know, what you are seeing in your community, so that they can work for you and understand what's going on in those areas. And you never know, they may ask you to come testify. They may ask you to share your story, so that more of the legislators can work and understand kind of what's going on in the community. So I am going to pass it to our hosts. And again, thank you again. I'll be monitoring the chat. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Lauren. And hi, folks. I'm Janae Pelletier. I'm a member of the commission. We did have a couple of questions, Lauren, just before you dropped totally off the video there. A lot of questions about mismatch of documents. Someone has a daughter who changed her gender marker on her passport to female, but she's concerned about renewing her passport. Someone else said, all of my documents have been updated for a few years except my passport. At this point, would you recommend I at least update my name on my passport so that there is some alignment? So what would you recommend for folks who are at this moment caught in that situation of limbo, where they maybe have a state document that doesn't match their passport or something else?
That is a great question. So first, I'll try to, if you are applying for a new passport, let's say trans individual applying for a new passport, have never had a passport, I would update your state ID, update your birth certificate, and then apply for your passport as far as using your gender identity that is on your documents. I know the executive order stated that everyone's gender is going to be at their gender at conception. I honestly cannot tell you how the federal government will find out that information. And even if they could, I feel like it would be very, very expensive for them to do that type of research for every single person who is applying for a passport, to go back through because obviously there's going to be some record that a person has changed their birth certificate, but I don't think that they are linked into these individual states databases to see who has changed their birth certificate. So just as a practical matter, I don't know how they would find that information out. I do know that on the passport website, as the last time I checked, it still says that the gender identity on a passport can be changed due to administrative error. So I don't know if, for example, a person who has previously had a passport, let's say it's stated the gender marker was F, and now they are applying for a passport or applying to renew and would like to change the gender marker to M, and all of their documents say M. I don't know if how they're going to decide the difference between, oh, this is a trans person changing their gender, or this was an administrative error on the previous passport. So that is something that we're looking at. I do have a couple of folks who, right before the executive order went out and the stop, or right before actually the halt on using the X marker on the passports came out, they sent in applications to change their gender on their passports by expedited mail. And so I'm waiting to hear back as far as what they hear on that and what the process is on that. So the other recommendation is to see if you can go into an office and have an appointment in person. Again, I don't know if you have possibly like an affirming individual who's on the other side of the desk may say, oh, this is a clerical error. Let me fix your passport so that it aligns with your other documents and the the expression, your gender expression and gender identity of the person that is in front of me. For the individual who said that their daughter has not yet is afraid to renew, again, I would say go through the process of renewing, if and just make sure that your state documents, again, I don't think they're going to request any additional documents, but I would just monitor any requests as you come up to the time when your passport may be expiring. But most renews, they don't ask you for more information, they just ask you to renew. So like, again, we are monitoring how they are contacting folks who have X markers. How are they going to determine what gender identity should be on the passports as far as their executive order goes? But like I said, it's going to be very, very expensive. And so anyone who currently has an X marker, if you do receive communication as far as like stating you can no longer have this X marker, I would provide documentation based on your gender identity, not your sex assigned at birth, and make them figure out what information if your gender identity does not match your sex assigned at birth. So that was a very long answer. I apologize. I'm an attorney, but I would say if you can update your IDs, update your birth certificate. If you need assistance in some of these states like Louisiana that make you jump through a lot of hoops, please reach out to organization that will assist. There's a lot of direct legal service organizations that can help and will help you with the process. But once you have your birth certificate and your ID matching, then apply for your passport using those documents. And again, we are monitoring folks to see what happens, and hopefully that there is not a way for them to like go back and decide that this passport is being applied for, that and it's different than the person's sex assigned at birth. Hopefully they will not have that. They will not have the ability to access that information for every individual applying for a passport, because technically they would have to check everyone, because there's no way that they would be able to say, okay, this person is trans, let us check, this person is not, let us check. The application is exactly the same. So everyone would just be applying and they would have to check for everyone, which would be extremely expensive. So hopefully that helps. And please feel free to email me directly for more information or very specific questions to your situation.
Thank you, Lauren. And we have gotten a few other groups of questions. So I think I'm going to group them together in the chat and you can take a look at them while our next speaker
Absolutely.
is speaking. That's all right.
Yes.
So it's my honor to introduce the Honorable Byron McFarlane, who is the first elected Register of Wills openly gay official for Howard County history. That was a mouthful. Byron is a proud Howard County native and product of Howard County Public Schools, and he has worked at the county, state, and federal levels of government. He has a JD from the University of Baltimore School of Law and his undergraduate degree from the University of Maryland, College Park. So it's my honor to turn over the presentation now to Byron.
Well, thank you, Janae. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Janae, for that kind introduction, and everyone for being here tonight, and everyone who helped organize this. I think it's such an important time for all of us to come together in solidarity. President Trump has only been in office for 15 days, and it feels like it's been months. There's an awful lot that we can do to protect ourselves, and what Lauren just shared and what I hope to share with you tonight is just some tangible things that you can do to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect the people you care about. And if I can just say like just one thing, you know, as we are all kind of dealing with this onslaught of negativity at the federal level, you know, I'll echo what some folks have said is, you know, thankfully we live in Maryland, and thankfully, you know, a lot of our counties, you know, are have moved in the right direction for our community. You know, we've been here before, and I take a little bit of comfort in the fact that we dealt with this kind of onslaught before. We made it through, and I am confident that we will get through it again. And we just have to fight. We just have to look out for each other, look out for ourselves, and not try to get worn out. All I can say, you know, aside from the tangible legal things that I'll talk about tonight, is take care of yourself, take care of your friends and family, find your, on a day in, day out basis, find your happy place that lets you take a little bit of a break from the harsh reality of some really disturbing things that are happening. I know last night I had a very long day at work, and I was just determined I wanted to do something for myself last night. So I watched Wicked for the very first time, and I'm glad that I did because I'd never seen it and I loved it. And so whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, I think that's what's going to keep us going. So that's my just attempt at words of wisdom here before I get into my presentation. So again, I appreciate this opportunity. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is, and I guess Liv, you have my PowerPoint, right?
I can. Give me one moment.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, I'll just say, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about estate planning and kind of, I guess it's not just estate planning, but it's sort of like also life planning. And I'm going to talk about what are commonly thought of as the 4 tools in the estate planning toolbox. And I'm just going to kind of jump into this as we, while we get loaded up here. But we think of 4 different documents. The Advance Directive, many of you have heard of, Power of Attorney, many of you have heard of, Revocable Trusts, that some of you have heard of, and of course, the Last Will and Testament. Each of these documents serves a different purpose, and I'll just say, I think, you know, of course, it would be great if everyone had a will and everyone had an advance directive and power of attorney. But let me just kind of break down and explain to you what each of those things are, and help give you a little bit of, give you some resources that you can use to, some of this stuff you can do on your own. So if any of you are feeling like, okay, this is going to be too expensive, I don't know if I'm going to do this or not, some of these things you can do yourself. And I'll share links with you that will point you in the right direction. So Liv, if you could please jump ahead to slide number 5. So I'm going to start with the Last Will and Testament. So this is a really important legal document that is your declaration of your wishes to be carried out after you pass away. Maryland has 3 simple requirements for a valid will. It has to be in writing, you have to sign it, and you have to have 2 witnesses. Any 2 adults who have mental capacity can be witnesses. They can be people who inherit in the will. That's you know, that's Maryland law. It's pretty simple. And the kind of overarching reason that it's really important to have these documents in place, this is the big picture here, is that, you know, essentially what happens if I don't have a will, I don't have an advance directive, which governs your medical decision making if you can't decide for yourself, or I don't have a power of attorney, which is essentially a document that lets someone help you, for example, pay your bills if you need help with that. What happens if I don't have any of this planning done? Well, the law determines what happens if you don't have any of these documents. So if you don't have a healthcare directive, for example, if you don't have an advance directive, you know, who makes medical decisions for you? Well, it's your spouse, If you don't have a spouse, it's your children. If you don't have children, it's your parents. If you don't have parents, it's your siblings. It sort of follows bloodlines. And what's important to think about in this, and each of us has a different situation, um, but to think about, okay, well, if something happens to me and I'm incapacitated, or I'm in a car accident, or for whatever reason I can't make a decision for my own, if I don't decide ahead of time who I want to make that decision for me, do I necessarily want the people who would be making those decisions by default to be making those decisions for me? I'll use myself as an example. A number of years ago, I was doing my estate plan, and at the time, and still, I'm not married, and I don't have a partner, and I don't have children. So for me, the default for who would handle my estate, who would make medical decisions for me, it was my parents. And I've had a very loving, affectionate, wonderful relationship with my mother for a very long time. My father has never supported my career or my being out as a gay man. So I obviously, wouldn't want him having anything to do with my assets or my estate or my dog or, medical decisions for me or anything. So for me, it was really important that I made sure that I had a will that identified, that it was my mother who would be taking care of my estate, that my mother would inherit everything from me, and that if there were a difficult situation, medical decision, where a medical decision had to be made, that my mother would make it and not my dad. So fast forward to today, my father's passed away, so it's not quite as important. But you have an opportunity right now, when you have the time to be thinking about some of these things. Now I'm not so worried that, the person who by default may be making decisions for me is going to do something wrong. But now I have the time to think, well, do I really want my mother in the position of having to potentially have to end life support for her son? And I don't want that for her. I know that it would be impossible for her to do that. So I've named my brother instead. And I know it wouldn't be easy for him either, but it would, to me, that's a gift to my mother to not have to make that decision. So, big picture, whether it's a will or an advance directive or any of the documents I'm going to be talking about, the purpose of all of this is to make all these decisions while you can, so that none of the sort of default rules that govern these parts of your life while you're alive and after you pass away determine what happens with you. So that's part of why it's really important for you to have a will. And if Liz, we could just move ahead a couple more slides. Yeah, if you could stop, the one before that is perfect. So we get lots of kind of standard questions about wills, and a quick overview here too is, what is in a standard will? The most important things are naming your personal representative. The more common used term for that is executor. So this is who is going to take care of your estate. And this is important because, again, we have these default rules that if you don't have a will, it'll default to, again, spouse, then children, then parents, then siblings, then nieces and nephews. And you can avoid all of that by having a will. And I see there are a couple of questions here. And there's a really good question about divorce and wills, and I will get to that in just a minute. But a couple standard questions that we get is, if you have a will that was executed in another state, is it still valid here? The answer is yes. All 50 states and DC have a law that say, if you have a will validly executed elsewhere, you can bring it here and it'll be valid here. So the answer to that is yes. What happens if your will gets lost, if you can't find it? There is a process where you can use a copy of a will if basically everyone who has an interest in the estate agrees to it. So you can get around that. Can you change your will after you execute it? I strongly discourage anyone from ever making any kind of notations or any kind of crossouts or anything on a will. Don't do that. You can also always do something called a codicil, which is an amendment to a will. Usually that's used if you want to like change who your personal representative is. And if you want to change who your personal representative is, or let's just say you came into some kind of heirloom and you wanted to go to a specific friend, something like that. You want your, maybe you want your motorcycle to go to your best friend or something like that. That's something that you can use a codicil. You don't have to completely change your will. And on that note, it's also important to know your will lasts forever until you revoke it or you write a new will. People ask me all the time, like, how often do I have to update my will? It's typically major life changes is what I suggest. So marriage and divorce, those are kind of the big times where I would suggest that you need to have a new will done. We see an awful lot of people pass away when they have a will that is left over from a former marriage. I wish I could take divorce lawyers and insist with them that they talk to their clients and make sure after you get a divorce, you must get a new will. Or at a bare minimum, you can take your old will that was written while you were married and simply destroy it and revoke it. And the reason why this is important is that typically people in their will, while they're married, they will name their spouse as their personal representative. They will say that their spouse inherits everything. And if you pass away and you have been divorced and that is the only will that you have, we look at that will and imagine every single provision in the will that refers to your spouse being deleted. And that's how we interpret it. And so, hold on one second. There's some kind of little glitch there. I don't know what that was. So it's always important. I would suggest after you've gotten a divorce, at least just destroy your will from your prior marriage, if not going all the way to writing a new will. And the last question here is, how can I revoke my will? And again, it's usually either by executing a new one or just physically destroying your old one. And once you have completed your will, what should you do with it? I always suggest to folks that one of the services, so every jurisdiction in Maryland has a Register of Wills office, and we have a service for safekeeping of wills. You can bring your will to us. It's a $5 fee. It's a lifetime fee, like you only pay it one time. And it's a confidential service. So you can file your will with us and we don't look at the contents and no one can see the contents of your will until you pass away. So I always think that that's, instead of leaving it at home where someone could conceivably get to it or leaving it with an attorney. Sometimes we have attorneys who retire and move out of state and people don't know where their wills are. File it with us, and all 24 Register of Wills offices communicate with each other. So if you have your will done in Baltimore City, okay, and you file it for safekeeping in Baltimore City, and you relocate to Howard County and you pass away here, when your family comes to my office to open your estate, we will check to see if you had a will filed anywhere in the state. So basically what you're doing is kind of already putting the will where it's supposed to be, or where it will need to be. So I always suggest that that's a great option for people. And the last couple of things I want to mention in terms of what you can do with your will, I mentioned that you can name a personal representative. You can also make bequests. So you get to decide, while you're living, who gets what essentially. So if you want to leave money to charity, if you want to leave it to a foundation, if you want to leave it to a nonprofit, if you want to leave it to someone other than who would naturally inherit it under, again, these like default rules that the state has that kind of generally follow bloodlines. So spouse, kids, parents, etc. You can do that with your will. That's really important. And there are some other things that are included in my presentation that I think is going to be circulated, but that's the big important piece here, is that by having a will, you are in control of these decisions. You are in control of making sure that your loved ones have a roadmap to handle your estate after you've passed away. And I can tell you on a personal level, I think it's so important that, you know, none of us wants to think about our own mortality, right? But when we take the time to do that, I think that by having all of this kind of stuff in place, number one, it's going to give you personally an extraordinary peace of mind. Just knowing that everything's done, everything is where it's supposed to be. There is a roadmap for your family if you get sick, if you need help with your bills, to decide who gets what when you pass away. And your family has that roadmap instead of trying to figure everything out after you're gone, or you may even have a situation where people fight amongst themselves, may have relatives fighting amongst themselves. You can avoid all of that by doing this planning. So the next thing I want to talk about, and Liv, if you could just jump ahead to, it's slide 14 would be great. Thank you very much. Something that's important to keep in mind as we're talking about, what may happen at the end of your life. When you pass away, you will have some combination of what are called probate and non-probate assets. Probate assets are assets that are governed by your will. And those are the ones that come through the probate process. You go through the Register of Wills in whatever jurisdiction you're in to determine who gets those assets. Those are assets that are titled just in your name alone or without a beneficiary. Everything else, anything that's jointly held or has a beneficiary on it, or a transfer on death designation or a payable on death designation, or anything that's held in a trust, all of that passes outside of probate. So one of the pieces of advice I can give everyone here is, if you want to try to avoid maybe the cost of having a will or going through the probate process, is take the time to sit down and look at all of your assets, look at your bank accounts, your motor vehicle, your home, anything that you have, any investments and anything like that, and make sure there's at least a beneficiary on it, if not a joint owner. And that way, after you pass away, the beneficiaries, I'll just give you an example. Instead of going through probate and dealing with my office and the will and everything, if I have a life insurance policy and I name my brother as the beneficiary, when I pass away, my brother doesn't have to go through any court to get the payout from that life insurance policy. He has to call the life insurance company, fill out a form, and they'll write him a check. And that's a really easy way, generally speaking, that is a free method of avoiding probate. You can do that with lots of assets. I mean, with bank accounts, it's easy to put a joint owner or a power of attorney on it, or a payable on death or transfer on death beneficiary on it. You can do that with almost any kind of financial asset. When it comes to motor vehicles, you can actually put a transfer on death beneficiary on your car now in Maryland. And so you can actually go onto the MVA website and you can put a beneficiary on your vehicle. And that helps someone like me who's single, because up until recently, when the law changed and allowed that, or the MVA changed their policies and allowed that, I have, all of my stuff has a beneficiary on it, so my family won't have to go through probate. But I was stuck with my car, and the only way to keep my car out of probate would be to make my brother a joint owner on my car. Well, I don't want to do that, but now I can put a beneficiary designation on it. So my vehicle, my car title right now, it says Byron McFarland, TOD, or I can't remember exactly what's on it, but basically they keep the beneficiary on file, so they know, if something happened to me, my brother or my mom could just take my title and a copy of my death certificate to the MVA, and they would transfer the title over without having to go through probate. So again, my advice here is to sit down and look at all of your assets, look at how they're titled. And if you can find a way to put a beneficiary or a joint owner on all of those assets, when when you pass away, your family will not go through probate. So that's a really easy way to avoid the process entirely. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to advanced directives, which is perfect. So advanced directives are also known as living wills or medical directives. This is really important, and I think everyone should have one. And you can do it for free. And I'm going to post this in the chat. So the next two documents I'm talking about, the advanced directive and power of attorney, these are forms that you can find online and you can fill out on your own. Okay. So the advanced directive, again, this is your medical directive. This is a document you can use to name a healthcare agent to make decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. This document it's quite lengthy, and you can actually also include funeral arrangements and organ donation, all those kinds of things in there. Once you have this completed, my suggestion would be that you take it and you give a copy to whoever you have named as your healthcare agent, and also to your primary care physician if you have one. But it's something to make sure. And you can also, if you have ever received any kind of medical attention from any, I believe it is any kind of doctor's office, hospital, you name it, affiliated with Johns Hopkins, you can actually call them and you can file your advanced directive electronically with them, and they all talk to each other and they will have it on file, so you don't have to carry around a piece of paper with you anywhere. So again, this is important so that, this was something that I had to deal with personally last year. My mother had cancer, and my mom is divorced, and my brother and sister and I had to make some decisions for her when she couldn't make them for herself. And it can lead to tension, and fortunately we were all on the same page, but it got me thinking about, well, what if we weren't? And so it really, useful tool to make those decisions and to name someone before something happens. And then the last two things I'm going to talk about are, actually, the last thing I want to talk about is domestic partnerships. And let me just make sure. Someone said the links aren't working. I think that you may just have to click through it a second time. I apologize. I don't use WebEx very much, so if there's any kind of thing with that, I apologize. But okay. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is something that is relatively new in Maryland, is that Maryland now has a domestic partnership registry. This went into effect in October of 2023. I worked with members of the bar and one of my counterparts in Baltimore County to create a domestic partnership registry. And the purpose of that was we were revising some probate law, and as part of that, we wanted to recognize the fact that, how we arrange ourselves in loving relationships has obviously evolved over time. Not everyone, can get married, wants to get married. There are a lot of reasons why people engage in long-term partnerships instead of getting married. My brother's in the middle of a divorce right now, as an example, and he has told me he wants another partner down the road, but he doesn't want to get married again. So in any event, what we have now in Maryland is a limited domestic partnership benefit it's kind of narrowly tailored to benefits for surviving domestic partners. So if you come to the Register of Wills, so all 24 offices in the state, we will issue what's called a certificate of domestic partnership. It looks like this. So it's a formal document where if you and your partner come and fill out a one-page form, and it's a $25 fee. You can become registered domestic partners. And what that means is that if either of you pass away without a will, that when the survivor, basically the survivor will be treated under Maryland law the same as a surviving spouse. So it's kind of a, you know, an inexpensive protection that you can have. You know, we have people who have gotten partnered in Maryland and gotten this kind of certificate in anticipation of getting married in the future, but knowing that, okay, well, at least for now, we'll have some minimal benefits before we get married. And so that, you know, seems to make sense. And one of the most important benefits is that it also would exempt your surviving partner from Maryland's inheritance tax. Maryland has a 10% inheritance tax that we collect. Most people are exempt from it. So spouses are exempt, siblings are exempt, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, stepchildren. There are a lot of exemptions under current law. But, you know, from my perspective, you know, if you have taken the affirmative step of becoming registered domestic partners, if your partner passes away, you wouldn't have to pay any taxes on what you inherit from them. So I do want to share, because I know someone asked earlier, you know, what's the deal in other states essentially. So let me see if I can share. There are a number of other jurisdictions that have domestic partner registries: California, DC, Illinois, Maine, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin. There are some large cities, municipalities that have domestic partner registries. There are some jurisdictions that have civil unions: Colorado, Illinois, New Jersey, and Vermont. And something important to know is that even though we've achieved marriage equality, is that these a lot of these old benefits for domestic partners or for people in civil unions, there are some states that have other names for those kinds of relationships. Those were all left on the books. And so just because we have marriage equality doesn't mean that some other kinds of relationships don't have some protections that they may be afforded under law. We used DC law because I think DC has one of the more comprehensive domestic partnership statutes as a model. But again, we started with just the sort of like probate and end of life tax kind of benefits. We may go beyond that, but for now, that's where we are. And the last thing I'll say is I want to answer this question from Becky. There's a question in the Q&A, and I've heard it come up many times. I guess all I can say is that if you're planning to get married, I would do it now. That would be my advice. I would not wait until there may be some kind of, whether it's Obergefell being overturned or something else. And there's another question: is there a time frame to qualify for domestic partnership, like if we've lived together for a year? As long as you sign our document under the penalties of perjury that you're in a partnership, and all it means is that you're not married or in a partnership with anyone else, we will issue you a certificate. So whether it's a week or a year or 50 years, whatever it is, we'll issue you the partnership. So if anyone has any questions, I see that people are dropping off. Anyone has any questions about wills, estates, trust, probate, advanced directives, powers of attorney, partnerships, anything like that, please do reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to try to refer you to attorneys if you need one. And thank you again for all the organizers for this webinar. I hope everyone's taking care of themselves. And if there are any final questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks so much, Byron. We do have a number of questions, and what we will do is we will follow this up with some more resources to the best of our ability. We may also have a second webinar based on quite a few of these questions that have come forward. I think one of the questions, last question I have for everyone's understanding, all of the things that you have mentioned tonight, currently administrated at either the state level or the county level. So folks who live in Maryland, who live in Howard County are entitled to the protections that have been enacted for us here now. Is that true?
Right. Yep.
Okay. I think in the interest of time, we will complete the webinar. Thanks again so much to Lauren and Byron for joining us. For those of you who are still here, I said it in the chat, you know, you're not alone. We had over 100 participants tonight. So there are a lot of folks here in our area that want to know the answers to these questions. Please do contact us. I put the information for the commission, and also Liv put the information there to send us an email. If you have suggestions for a webinar, suggestions for speakers, please do reach out to us. We are here to help navigate these times as best we can, and we're here for you. So please reach out to us, and we'll do our best to get these resources to folks. So thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Is there anything else, Liv, before we adjourn? Okay. All right.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much. Be safe out there, everybody, and take care of one another.
Thank
Good night.
you. Bye.